Now coming to the fourth element of directing, that is communication. No matter how qualified a manager might be, no matter how many degrees he has to his credit, but if a manager is not able to communicate effectively, that is, if he is not able to communicate effectively and make the subordinates understand things well, then he is going to be a complete failure, right? That means communication, effective communication gives a meaning to the rest of the functions of management, right? Communication can be defined as the sum total of all things a person does when he wants to create an understanding in the mind of another person. It involves a systematic process of telling, listening and understanding. Now there is a proper process that is followed for the purpose of communication. First of all, there is a sender, that is the person who is going to give the message. There is a message, that is some information that has to be transmitted to another person or which you want another person to understand. That message is encoded in terms of symbols or words, etc. Right? Then there is a media through which the message is going to go to the receiver. It may be in the form of a mail or a telephonic conversation. Then the encoded message is decoded by the receiver and is understood by the receiver, and then the receiver gives a feedback to the sender, right? This is the whole process of communication. Now in between that you can see there is a noise. These are the barriers to effective communication. Clear? Now communication basically can be of two types. You have your formal communication and you have your informal communication. Formal communication is a communication which follows only the official channels of communication as per the organizational structure that has been designed, right? That means you cannot, you will have to follow a particular hierarchy. That means if a worker working at the supervisory level, if the worker working at a supervisory level as per the official chain of command is supposed to be reporting to his supervisor, supervisor will further communicate the message to middle level management, then middle level management will take the matter to the top level management, right? So this is the official formal communication. These are the formal means of communication. Now formal communication can also be of two types. There is a vertical communication and then there is horizontal communication. Vertical communication is again of two types. Downward communication, that means when communication flows from top to bottom, right? If people at the top level management, they want to communicate the policies and objectives of the organization to the other levels of management, this will come under downward communication. And upward communication is which goes from bottom to the top. It may be regarding the feedback of the employees working at the supervisory level. It may be regarding the grievances or problems of the employees which have to be presented to the top level of management. Coming to the horizontal or lateral communication, it is the communication that takes place between the different departments. We all know that in every organization we have production department, sales department, marketing, finance, HR, right? So any kind of communication that takes place between these departments is called as a horizontal or lateral communication. So these were the two types of formal communication wherein the official channels of communication are to be followed, right? Now coming to the formal communication networks, right? There are about 5 communication networks that we are going to discuss. Number 1 being a single chain network. In a single chain network, right, it is like, this is a superior A, he will give the information to B, that is the person working under him. B will pass on the information to C and C will finally pass the information to D, right? He is the superior, A is the superior and rest all of them are subordinates working at different levels, right? Communication flow from superior to his subordinate through a single chain. Then comes the second network, that is wheel network. इसमें क्या होता है? That here A is the boss, right? B, C, D and E, they are the subordinates. B, C, D and E are the subordinates. So they cannot talk to each other. If E wants to talk to C, he will have to go through A. Any two subordinates wanting to talk to each other or wanting to communicate some information to each other, they will have to go through the boss. This is a wheel network, right? After this comes up the circular network. After this comes up the circular network, wherein you have A, you have B, C, D and E, right? So in case of circular network, each person working in an organization can talk only to two of his adjoining people. Like C can talk to A and E, E can communicate with A, C and D, D can communicate with B and E, and B can communicate with A and D. So in case of circular network, communication moves on in a circle and each person can communicate with his adjoining two person. So the flow is very, very slow. Then you have free flow network. You have a free flow network. Free flow network में क्या होता है? You have basically again circular वाला ही हम structure बनाएंगे, but there is a difference. Right? You have here all people are free to talk to each other. They are free to communicate with each other. So as a result of which the communication is faster. Communication works faster. The message is transmitted faster because you are free to talk to one another. Then last is your inverted V. Inverted V network, wherein two subordinates A and B can directly talk to their boss C and can also talk directly to their boss's boss D. Two subordinates A and B can talk directly to their boss C and can also directly talk to their boss's boss D, right? So these are the 5 communication network, right, for formal communication, that is single chain, wheel network, circular network, free flow network and inverted V network, right? This was about the formal communication. Now as against this we have informal communication, wherein the communication that takes place without following the official channels of formal lines of communication, right? This is generally referred to as grapevine because it spreads in the organization at a very, very fast pace, and the need for having an informal organization within an organization arises because of the need of employees to discuss, to chit-chat with their friends regarding their problems, can be personal, can be official, right, to discuss that what is each one's opinion on a new policy that has been introduced in the organization, which cannot be done following the formal lines of communication. I hope with this the meaning of formal communication and informal communication has been pretty clear to you. Now coming to the next topic of barriers to communication. Now proper and effective communication is very essential for any manager to perform his function. Effective communication, when we say, it means that जो भी आप कहना चाह रहे हैं वो वैसे ही समझा जाए जैसे आप उसको समझाना चाहते हैं, right? That means a message is understood in the same manner as you intend it should be understood, right? If there is a lack of effective communication in an organization, then all functions of the management cannot be performed effectively and efficiently. So basically the success of all functions of management depends upon how effective the communication is in an organizations, right? But the breakdowns in the communication, they make communication ineffective, and these breakdowns in communication, they are called as barriers to communication. Now there are 4 barriers of communication that we've discussed over here. Semantic barriers or linguistic barriers, right? These are the barriers which are basically these are the problems which are created in the process of encoding and decoding of a message during the communication process. Number 1 being badly expressed message. If you have not been able to use the right words, choose the right words to express your message, then it may not be understood in the same manner as intended. For example, if the boss tells his subordinate that I want you to finish off this task soon, right? Now he is not being specific that soon means what, 1 hour or 2 hour or 3 hour or maybe the next morning, right? So similarly the employee may understand it as, that is to suit his convenience, that I can do this task by tomorrow morning. Fine. So there is a gap of there is a gap between the understanding of the manager and that of the employee, right? Then words with different meanings. Now use of certain words which may mean different to different people, right, often makes the communication ineffective. For example, cost may mean production cost to the production manager, and it may mean cost of advertising to the marketing manager. Clear? Such types of language barriers may create difficulties in effective communication. Then faulty translations. If there is a message which has to be given to the workforce in the factory who only understand Hindi, and the manager has given the message in English. So if the translator makes a mistake in translating the message into another language, then the whole meaning of the message is going to change. Unclassified assumptions. Sometimes we make certain assumptions which may be interpreted differently. Like a boss may tell his subordinate to take care of the guests. Subordinate may understand taking care of the guests would mean just receiving them at the airport and dropping them to the hotel. And whereas boss's understanding of taking care was receiving them at the airport, dropping them to the hotel, and taking them out for lunch, taking them out for sightseeing, and so on and so forth. Right? So again there was a gap in understanding of the person who's sending the message, okay, and the receiver. Then comes technical jargon. Sometimes people use, managers, they may use such technical words. They may use such technical words which are beyond the understanding of the workforce. They are not able to understand these technical words which have been used, as a result of which they are not able to understand the message which is being communicated to them. Last, decoding of body language and gestures. It is to be communicating effectively, it's very important कि whatever I'm saying, my body language should second that. My body language should second that, right? It should support it. If I'm telling you, you can discuss your personal problems or you can discuss your grievances with me threadbare, right? And I should have a gesture of being calm and composed when I'm telling you that. And if I have a frown on my face, right, or I'm telling you that you can openly tell me, my negative points or wherever you think that I have gone wrong. As a boss, if I'm asking you, you can openly come up to me and tell me on my face that I did not like this decision of yours. Now, if I'm saying this with a very calm and composed face, right, and my body language is also such which is making you feel that I genuinely mean what I'm saying. But if I'm saying all this with a frown on my face and I'm not giving a very, very calm and composed feeling to the audiences, then whatever I'm saying, the message I'm saying and my body language, they do not go together, right? Second barrier is your psychological barrier. First one being absent-mindedness. Now it could be the absent-minded, it is basically the absent-mindedness of the receiver. Let us say if the employee is saying something to the boss or is expressing his problem to the boss, he's saying his problem to the boss and the boss is preoccupied with some other official problem, he may not be completely attentive in listening to the problem of the employee. As a result, जब उसने सुनी ही नहीं है उसकी बात properly, तो वो उसका कोई solution भी नहीं दे सकती. तो communication will fail over here, right? Next is poor retention and loss by transmission. Now when the message has to be communicated following the official channels of communication, now when in the process of being transmitted from one level to another, from one person to another, some part of the message may get distorted or some words may get eaten up. As a result, when the message reaches the final destination, it may mean something different. Then distrust. If the sender and the receiver do not trust each other, they may not understand each other, they may not even want to understand the message that has been given, they may not understand each other's messages in the original sense, and the lack of the trust may be due to the past experiences. Then comes your premature evaluation. Sometimes we do not even bother, we evaluate the message, we evaluate the information that is being communicated to us even before the complete message is communicated. Like if we say, if you get a mail that tomorrow Saturday hai, kal agar second Saturday, the second Saturday is going to be working. Itna padke everyone just fumes up that why is the second Saturday working, but we did not bother to read the in continuation. It has been written that in lieu of this, a compensatory off will be given on the coming Saturday. Right? So premature evaluation, because psychologically we are set second Saturday, so we are in a holiday mood. So anybody, if we get a message that second Saturday is going to be working, definitely you react. But we should always wait to read the complete message and complete information and then react. Then comes your organizational barrier. Number one being organizational policy. Now, if organizational policy is not in tune with free flow of communication, it may render communication ineffective. Right? If organizational policy is such that you have to follow the official chain of command, you have to follow the official lines of communication, so communication is there is not going to be any free flow of information. Secondly, rules and regulations. Rigid rules and regulations also render the communication ineffective. Agar kisi organization mein rule hai, people are not supposed to be talking to one another, they only have to talk to one another through the boss. So the communication will go ineffective. Status. Now, status of the superior, it creates a psychological distance between him, the superior and his subordinates. Sometimes, subordinates, they may, just because he is the CEO of the company, it is because of his status, they may feel scared or they may not feel comfortable going up to the superior and discussing their problems threadbare. Right? Then, a complex organizational structure. If there are a large number of managerial levels, communication generally gets delayed, and there are number of filtering points at each, because there are number of filtering points at each level. Now, if there are too many levels in an organization, and if the top level management has some message to be given, some information to be communicated at the supervisory level of the management, too many levels in an organization, the message will take a very, very long time to reach the final destination. And secondly, हर एक लेवल पे मैसेज फिल्टर होके आएगा, ठीक है, जो उनके मतलब की इंफॉर्मेशन थी उन्होंने अपने पास रख के then they will pass on the remaining message to the next level. Right? Then organizational facilities. If facilities for the smooth and free flow of communication are not there, for example, you don't have any suggestion boxes, or you do not have facilities like frequent meetings and complaint box, etc., that encourage free flow of information, so that will also render your communication ineffective. Then last type of barriers, coming to personal barriers. Number one being fear of challenge to authority. If there is a communication that the superior has received and he thinks that if he communicates this entire message to the subordinates, that may pose a threat to his, that may challenge his authority. ठीक है, अगर ये communication आ जाती है, if you have any problem with your immediate boss, you are most welcome to come up to the CEO of the organization and discuss the problem. He may not pass on this entire message, or may pass the message partly, because this may pose a challenge or a threat to his authority. Lack of confidence of superiors in his subordinates. If the superior does not have enough amount of confidence in his subordinates, he is not going to involve them in the process of making policies. Right? He may not seek their advice or suggestions in doing anything. He may not like to communicate with them at all. Unwillingness to communicate. Sometimes subordinates are not prepared to communicate with their boss, thinking that it may adversely affect their interest or for the fear of punishment. Lack of proper incentives. The subordinates will be forthcoming with their suggestions only if their suggestions are implemented and only if they are recognized for giving such a suggestion. But if their suggestions are not taken into account, then the employees are going to be demotivated and will further abstain from giving any kind of suggestions for the betterment of the organization. Now coming to, we've just discussed that what are the different barriers to communication. Now let us discuss the measures to overcome these barriers of communication. Number one being clarification of ideas before communication. It's very important, be it an organization or otherwise as well. The sender of the message must himself be very clear of the message that he wants to communicate. He should be very clear of what he wants to say, because it's only when you're clear of what you want to say that you will be able to put it across in the right manner, choosing the right words, making sure that the receiver interprets it in the same manner as intended, right? Basically, the message should be clear to the sender in all respects. Secondly, communicate according to the level of understanding of the receiver. If you are communicating, right, with the audiences who are very comfortable with Hindi, so it will be best if you communicate with them in Hindi only and avoid, and if not Hindi, like let's say if they are comfortable with English but then they are not very well versed with the language, so it will be very important for you to understand that you will be required to use only very simple English, avoid using any kind of complex words, right, which may be difficult for them to comprehend or understand. Thirdly, consult and involve others before communicating. Now, before communicating a message, a sender should consult and encourage others to participate. He should basically, like let's say if a manager has to serve a memo in his department, he should first try and consult his peers, right, make them read the letter or make them read the memo, that has he drafted it properly, मतलब थोड़ा रूड तो नहीं हो रहा है कहीं, या कोई ऐसी इंफॉर्मेशन तो नहीं है जो कि उसने मिस आउट की है. It's always better to consult others before communicating. Then take care of languages, tone and content of message. Now the language that has been used, if it is a case of a written communication or in fact oral communication also, the sender must be very, very careful about the language that he chooses to use, right? He should not make use of any kind of an offensive words or abusive words while talking to people around, while communicating the message, and he should not be hurting the sentiments of anyone, right? He should not be hurting the sentiments of anyone. The choice of the words has to be such, right? The tone has to be very, very soft, I would say, or appropriate. Okay? It should not be, the message should not be communicated in a derogatory tone, right? The message should evoke response from the receiver. Then comes ensure proper feedback. Communication is complete only when the sender is understood by the receiver. Only when the sender is understood by the receiver and as intended, right? The receiver must be encouraged to react. The receiver must be encouraged to react, and this can be prompted by asking questions from the receiver regarding the message which has been communicated, right? Then follow-up communications. Now these follow-up communications should be carried out at regular intervals so as to see whether the instructions have been understood well by the subordinates or not, right? This will tell us whether there is a complete or a good understanding of the instructions given to the subordinates or not, and if there is any confusion, that can be clarified later on. Then last but not the least, the manager himself has to be a good listener. He has to give a patient hearing to the suggestions of the subordinates, to the problems of the subordinates. Only then will they develop a kind of faith in the manager.